Ruby stands in front of me, and I'm making an interview for Pink Channel in Hamburg. Ruby, what you're making in Berlin? What's the issue you're staying here?
I moved here after having lived 13 years in Florida. Initially, I thought it was a move for the majority because of needing to be an artist, but recognizing that a lot of it has to do with the amplified violence on queer, non-binary, trans bodies, and finding a space of community where that conversation is rich and enmeshing with other artistic perspectives.
Do you can specify your art? What you're doing?
Best two-sentence phrase is, I am a material slut that loves to perform. My foundation is in ceramics, so that informs a lot of material practices, but I tend to sew my own work. I take objects and I put them in drag. So for instance, I had a 7-year project of taking a truck that is otherwise a very masculine object and working with over 30 different artists over 6 years and turning it into a performance platform, hanging flags, working with artists out of the back of it to combat Confederate flag culture and white supremacy, and performing in spaces that are not necessarily exclusive to institutions, so parking lots, stop signs, gas stations, and parking garages as a form of bringing art to a more broader community and creating a queer smoke signal. So doing projects like that kind of opens up all materials because material is language.
How can people booking you? Do you have a social media account or something else?
Yeah. My social media account is Flesh Piece. That's like the skin, a piece of flesh. So that's probably the best way you can find me. My website is grossly not updated, so I would tackle that first as the best way.
I hope you have an Instagram account.
That is my Instagram account. My Instagram account is Flesh Piece, and I would say you can also find me fleshpiece@gmail.com if you refuse to be part of the meta universe, which I completely understand. So if you're outside of that, fleshpiece@gmail.com also works great.
We both here in the British Embassy, and we have had an interesting event. You told us something about your gender or sex position. Can you tell us something? How do you define yourself in the gender room?
I would say that I am non-binary. I think that a lot of folks would read me as transmasculine. I have a beard, and that beard is a very stark representation of masculinity. I was assigned female at birth, and so no matter what the transformations of my body have been, I still tend to be grounded in the feminine and that relationship to it. I tend to navigate with pronouns, although I know they are very weighted and significant and important for validation in certain bodies, but I am more fluid with the use of those pronouns because it depends on who I'm talking to and what circumstance that it comes to. Language is constantly failing us, and so without language stumblings, there's more important things at stake for talking about gender than just pronouns. And so for my body, I hold a little bit more open fluidity for it. So as long as someone's not addressing me antagonistically or in a derogatory way, I am open to conversations about the fluidity of my body. But my identity is my art. My art is my body. Like, there is no separation between art and life. And so the reason why my artistic name is Flesh Piece is because this is my autonomy to design it and to design my own gender.
I think all gender diverse people have to perform femininity. All. I think it is not possible to be gender diverse without performing femininity. How do you see this?
I think I would agree with that. There's these variations of the binary written all over our bodies, no matter if you're someone that identifies or not with cisgendered or trans or non-binary. These two extremes affect us in their performities in different ways, just as they're attributed to objects, which is what I said in putting objects in drag. And so when I started to use testosterone as an addition to my body, and I looked at myself in the mirror and had to confront masculinity while simultaneously saying out loud, I hate men, I saw a contradiction of hate from myself and needed to rectify merging the fluidity of these binaries together. And I had to ask the question, why is it when we ask what is positive masculinity, the majority of the answers are layered with femininity? And so what does positive masculinity look like outside of femininity? And it doesn't. It's folded on itself. And both things are interchangeable. There is not just softness and hardness, there are the spaces in between that, the folds. And I'm more interested in those folds. But I think that in a patriarchal culture, which a lot of us exist in and feel the pressures of that, the feminine is going to exist in all of us because that's the softness in a binary that we need for something that has a precedence towards hardness.
My message to transmasculine people is that the better way to find to themselves is not to copy cis masculinity. Would you say that it is important for transmasc people to find a way to their femininity?
I would almost say look to nature. Look to the examples that are outside the binaries of masculinity and femininity to let alternative things teach us about what these behaviors and performances can look like and be. That's not in such a linear example.
Is femininity or womanhood or feminism the key of the gender debate, or is this a key to gender? To talk about patriarchy and the violence that the patriarchy system do to women or to gender diverse people?
I think we have to talk about it because it's a system that we feel the compression of frequently, and we feel the violence coming from so often. It's you cannot turn a blind eye to something that we're swimming in. But we can find alternative ways to exist, and I think it's the and also. It's like, yes, feminism, but also looking towards indigenous and intersectional ways of seeing and being two spirits, things that are beyond gender, as a way of evolving beyond the patriarchy. Like, we have to talk about patriarchy because we experience it every day. We experience the violence of it. Anything that hits the surface of this feminine, how it's consumed, how it's performed, how it's culturally represented, affects us deeply because of the oppressions of patriarchy. But there are also ways in intersectional feminism that I think we can tackle this the best.
Feminism is not what happened in the USA. You've grown up in Texas. And I think a sort of Texas come to the whole USA. How do you impress it yourself?
I grew up in Texas, moving between Dallas and Austin, and then spending 7 years in El Paso, Texas. I then moved to Florida and was in Florida for 13 years. Texas has a huge presence in the United States because everything's bigger in Texas. But even more so, I feel like Florida has, more oppression than Texas. It's not the oppression Olympics. It's just that when I'm in Florida, there is this, my friends and I would talk about it. It's like Florida is the canary of the mine of the United States. What's happening in Florida, the crazy Floridian, is populating, this Proud Boy is populating the world. It's something I experienced in Texas. It is present in Texas. There's a correlation between these southern states and this sort of mentality. But it is, both of those states are swallowing the United States. I hope that the state protections in spaces like California and Minnesota and Michigan and some of these other states that are really trying to provide a sanctuary amongst the current political toxicity are able to maintain outside of some of the federal policy that are happening. but I don't know what to expect out of this because this has become a class issue that supersedes all of these other individualisms in a way. And I think that's the scariest part because you can see it mirror, as many people have posted and said, the things that felt like the beginning of the Holocaust and Hitler's rise because of class and CEOs and money. And I think that those things, along with educational reform, are some of the most frightening.
What do you think happens in Germany after the Bundestagswahl? AfD and CDU will win.
Can you explain the
the election. We have in February the election in Germany. And the right parties in Germany are CDU and AfD.
Right, yes. And we're in a ring of
what do you think when these parties will win?
I cannot and don't want to predict the outcome of what could happen more than I would rather say that it's time to really solidify and continue to really bridge the communities that we need to not isolate us from the fights we have ahead of us.
If you have a wish, what wish maybe is it?
I feel like it's a low bar. Find people you love and keep those communities close. Figure out alternative ways of communicating.
This was the interview with Ruby for Pink Channel in Hamburg. Thank you very much for this very cool interview.
Thank you so very much. It was a pleasure.